All right. Well, I think we are live. Hopefully, everybody can hear and see us. If not, feel free to add comments into the chat, which you're welcome to do throughout the seminar anyway, to ask questions or post any other comments that you might find relevant. My name is Paula Cipierre. I am Director of Data Ethics and Innovation, and I am thrilled to be collaborating today with Jona Boeddinghaus, Chief Operations Officer at Daiki, on a joint webinar on how to implement AI literacy in practice from both a legal and technical perspective. And basically what we want to do today is to walk you through what the new European AI law, the AI Act, requires from companies in terms of implementing AI literacy with staff. But we will also talk about what might be done sort of on the back end, on the technical level, to ensure responsible AI more generally, and how you might start building out responsible AI practices at your respective organizations. But before we do so, why don't we do a brief round of introductions? We can move on to the next slides. As mentioned, my name is Paula Cipierre. I'm currently Director of Data Ethics and Innovation at ADA, but I'm also a member of the advisory board at Daiki, which is also why I'm particularly excited to be here today. I have been working at the intersection of data protection and data ethics for more than a decade. Prior to my current role, I led the European privacy engineering team at Palantir Technologies, where I helped customers implement legal and ethical requirements into technical design and organizational practice. For a long time, this consisted of helping customers implement the requirements of the EU General Data Protection Regulation. But as many of you in the seminar no doubt know, there's a whole plethora of requirements that companies have to deal with in the digital sphere. So you cannot look at these requirements in an isolated manner. So over time, I also help companies implement information security requirements, and most recently, the requirements of the EU AI Act. And my current role basically consists of developing new products at the intersection of AI ethics and regulation, and the new training on AI literacy, which I will briefly touch upon towards the end of my presentation, is one aspect of that. But before I dive into that, I will hand it over to Jona, who will also introduce himself.
Yes, many thanks, Paula. Yeah, my name is Jona Boeddinghaus. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. As mentioned, I'm CEO of Daiki. I'm also the co-founder and managing director of Grading Zero, which is a Vienna-based company for AI and machine learning. My background is indeed software and machine learning, working in AI for over 15 years now. I studied philosophy, computer science, and cognitive science back in the days. So it's kind of the intersection already of machine learning AI and now responsible and trustworthy AI, which we do with Daiki. And yeah, looking forward to speaking a bit more about the technical details of this AI literacy topic.
Great. Thank you, Jona. Well, I'm afraid you're stuck with me first for the boring legal part, but I promise to make it as digestible as I possibly can. So moving on to the next slide. Basically, I imagine one of the main reasons why a lot of you guys are in this webinar today is that in February this year, one of the first requirements of the EU AI Act became applicable. Actually, several requirements became applicable. One was that prohibited practices need to be discontinued in the EU. But another one that is a lot more relevant to most companies is the fact that AI literacy also became a requirement by law in the EU, which essentially requires that all organizations developing or deploying AI in the EU take reasonable measures to ensure a sufficient level of AI literacy of their staff and other persons handling AI systems on their behalf. Now, there are already several important things to note at this moment in time. The requirement of AI literacy is listed in Article 4 AI Act, but what Article 4 does not say is how the EU defines AI literacy. That is actually listed in Article 356, part of the definitions. And if you look at the definitions, you will see that the AI Act defines AI literacy as, on the one hand, the ability to make an informed deployment of AI systems, so to know how to use AI systems effectively, but also to gain awareness about the opportunities, risks, and possible harms. So that, on the other hand, means using, developing and deploying AI systems responsibly. So you will see this kind of dichotomy throughout the AI Act, that on the one hand, it's supposed to enable innovation, right, using AI systems effectively, but also doing so in a responsible manner. And that's essentially what Article 4 AI literacy is all about. There are several complications to this, however, in the sense that the lawmakers did not provide detailed guidance on what they imagine AI literacy will require in practice. What they do emphasize, however, is that in implementing AI literacy at a respective organization, one does have to take into account the context of that organization, amongst others, what background the employees have, for instance, if these are technical or non-technical employees, the context in which the AI system is to be used, and also the perspective of affected persons. So in the development and deployment of your AI products, you have to ensure that whatever those AI products are, that your employees know how to use them in an informed manner. This is already context specific, but also appropriate to the background and the context in which they operate. Next slide. In other words, if we break this down further, AI literacy essentially encompasses three components that can be derived from both the requirement in Article 4 and the definition in Article 356. First of all, legal knowledge, sufficient level of AI literacy, and this is also confirmed in some of the recitals, which emphasize that AI literacy is also about ensuring the correct implementation of the AI Act overall. So there are some core concepts at a legal level that employees need to understand. Then there's a technical aspect to AI literacy. So that's about the ability to make an informed deployment of AI systems. Inevitably, that's context specific too, because different organizations use different AI systems. So what an informed development and deployment looks like depends from one organization to the other. Which brings us to the third point, the role and context specific aspect of AI literacy. So in developing your AI literacy strategy, you do have to take into account the background and role of your employees, the context in which the AI systems will be used, and the perspective of affected persons. So ultimately, perhaps your customers or other people who might be affected by your systems. Moving on to the next slide. What does that mean in terms of core requirements? Next slides. Well, first, there's the legal aspect to this, like what's the basic legal knowledge? And to some of you in the room who might also have some background in data protection, as you know, data protection officers also have to ensure that employees have a minimum sort of like knowledge of data protection in their organizations too. And I think comparably to that, there's a minimum amount of knowledge that employees will have to know as part of their AI literacy efforts as well. The first important thing that they have to understand, of course, is whenever they are in fact interacting with an AI system as that's defined by the AI Act, and similar to the definition of personal data in the EU General Data Protection Regulation, that's not necessarily intuitive. So there are several components to the definition of AI systems, the way that's listed in the AI Act, for instance, that they need to be machine-based, that they can be adaptive, that they are able to influence their environment, based on inferences that they receive. So there's a whole series of sort of aspects to that definition that employees should be aware of to understand whenever they do in fact interact with an AI system or not. Second, an aspect of core knowledge is the role that the organization plays with regards to the AI system. And in particular, if the organization operates as a provider or a deployer of an AI system. What does that mean? Well, providers of AI systems are the organizations that actually build the AI systems from scratch. So the ones that choose the AI models, control the underlying data, and basically determine the purpose of the AI system. Those are the providers of AI systems. Deployers of AI systems, on the other hand, buy or license existing AI systems as they are. So they don't fundamentally change AI systems, they just use them out of the box. So for instance, if you as an organization use ChatGPT or other comparable LLM-based systems in your marketing operations, you would be a deployer of the system. However, there's a catch. For instance, if you attach your brand to the system, so if we at Ada would say, oh, we use Ada GPT internally, then we would automatically become the provider of the system, including all responsibilities that might entail. And also if you significantly change the purpose of, or like the functioning or purpose of an AI system. And that can become particularly tricky if you change, for instance, a general purpose AI system into a high-risk AI system, because then all of a sudden you have a whole suite of obligations, so employees should be aware of that as well. That might actually realistically happen, for instance, if your employees start experimenting with AI systems in the employment relationship, particularly in recruiting. I would be very careful about that, also from a data protection perspective. But that's why it's important to have that awareness. Third important aspect is an ability to evaluate the opportunities, risks, and possible harms of AI systems. From my perspective, that's really the core part of AI literacy as that's defined in the EU AI Act, because that's really about developing awareness for responsible AI. So for instance, if you use AI in marketing, an opportunity might be that you can put together content more quickly and more efficiently, and that the content is better as well. But a risk might also be that the content is poorly prompted, that it's not verified sufficiently by humans. And this concept of human oversight is actually also an extremely important one under AI literacy as that's defined by the AI Act. So these are certain risks that are associated with that, and possible harms, of course, that could result from a poor use of AI in marketing. Include undermining customer trust, but it could also even result in sort of like misinformation be spread and potential liabilities. So it's just important that employees, as they develop and deploy AI systems, have this awareness of both the opportunities associated with AI systems, but also their risks. And of course, as soon as you undergo these analyses, you can also immediately start mitigating potential risks. So there's benefits to the organization as a whole. Last but not least, employees should also have basic familiarity with the concept of high-risk AI systems, because, as mentioned, there are special obligations attached to the development and deployment of AI systems. The AI Act emphasizes the particular importance of AI literacy in the context of high-risk AI systems as well. So it's just obviously important that employees are trained appropriately whenever they interact with these systems. And of course, liabilities are also significantly higher when something goes wrong with those. Over to the next slide. In terms of technical knowledge, as mentioned, it's pretty straightforward. Employees need to be able to use AI systems in an informed manner. So essentially, this just means employees should know how to use the AI systems that are made available to them. I think this one's nearly kind of funny because it seems so self-evident, right? Because obviously this is not just like a compliance requirement, but also a business benefit that if you pay for AI tools, that your employees also know how to use them, but it's also a part of AI literacy, as that's required by the EU. And then last but not least, when implementing AI literacy, organizations do have to take into account employees' background and role, context in which AI systems are to be used, and the perspective of affected persons. So beyond this foundational knowledge that I mentioned previously, companies may also have to consider investing in additional trainings for specific groups of employees, as that might be required given the role that the organization plays. For instance, if an organization builds AI systems from scratch, obviously the employees building those systems have a lot more knowledge that they need to have in terms of AI literacy than non-technical users that just use out-of-the-box AI systems as they are. And then you may also have to consider investing in additional AI literacy trainings, depending on the type of AI systems you operate. So you probably want to invest in specific AI literacy measures if you operate high-risk systems or not. One thing I will note at this moment in time already is that, strictly speaking, Article 4 AI literacy is not a training requirement. So it says nowhere, oh, you have to train your employees, but it does say employees need to have a certain amount of AI literacy. So they need to be sort of educated in some way. And since organizations are responsible for ensuring that their employees have this knowledge, it's intuitive at least that trainings are a way to provide that knowledge, but I do want to make that distinction because the legal community makes it as well. Over to the next slide. Yes, best practices for implementation. So first off, I think it's helpful to create a foundation of knowledge amongst all employees interacting with AI systems that incorporate precisely these core concepts of the AI Act that I mentioned: definition of AI system, roles and responsibilities along the life cycle of AI, opportunities, risks, and possible harms of AI, and also this distinction between regular and high-risk AI systems. Second aspect, again, relates to technical knowledge. So if you want to support your employees in the informed use of AI systems, and also sort of like be aware of how they can be used in practice, it might also be helpful in best practice to create an inventory of AI systems, including who has access to what system, and then training your employees how to use them accordingly. And theoretically, in that inventory, you could also already have a column that lists opportunities with possible harm, so you can also support your staff on that level as well. And then the third aspect that I already mentioned is, again, to determine as part of your AI literacy strategy whether you want to invest in further AI literacy measures as well, depending on your role or the type of AI system in place. Now, we obviously will have room for questions throughout the webinar and also towards the end after Jona's part of the presentation, but to already preempt a couple of them. First of all, a question that I always receive, a very important question as well, is what fines are associated with non-compliance. And here, I can sort of alleviate worries a little bit in the sense that there are at least no explicit fines associated with non-compliance with Article 4 AI Act. So there's a kind of like list of like infractions and associated fines in the AI Act as well. AI literacy is not listed there. However, the European AI Office recently did a webinar where they essentially suggested just because there's nothing listed there doesn't mean there wouldn't be a fine if you don't comply. And I think there's an additional component here where inevitably, if something goes wrong with your AI system, and then a supervisory authority investigates, and it then turns out you didn't train your employees appropriately, then obviously you're in a lot more trouble than you were beforehand because you essentially didn't comply with the legal requirement. So you need to implement Article 4 regardless because it's a legal requirement. You don't want to be in the awkward position where your AI systems cause harm, and then it turns out you didn't train your employees appropriately. But then inevitably, if your employees are trained in using AI systems effectively and ethically, the likelihood that something will go wrong is obviously significantly lower as well. That said, if you're in this webinar and thinking, oh gosh, this requirement already came into effect in February, and I have not yet started on AI literacy, am I in trouble yet? Here I can sort of calm you down as well, in the sense that in many member states, the supervisory authorities have not yet even been defined. There's a deadline for this in August. So before August 2024, no enforcement will begin. That said, and here's a small caveat that I also wasn't even tracking that much until I participated in this webinar by the European AI Office, where they essentially suggested, well, there's always room for private action as well, right? So if you have an employee who is not satisfied with your AI literacy measures, or perhaps also a customer who then complains, that's in a way that enforcement or complaints could happen earlier as well. So I guess the bottom line is here, whether you want to or not, investing in AI literacy will become part of your compliance efforts. If you develop or deploy AI systems in the EU, there are many good reasons for this. But one of them is also that you could get into trouble if you don't do so. Moving on to the last part, before I hand it over. As mentioned, I work at ADA. ADA is an organization that focuses on upskilling employees for the digital age. We have a variety of programs towards that end, but one thing that we developed in this context as well is precisely an online training that teaches employees the foundations of AI literacy as that's defined in the AI Act, so precisely this core knowledge that I mentioned earlier. It's an online training. It lasts 1 to 2 hours. You can do it on demand on your own time. So you can either access it through our platform or make it available through your learning management systems. It's available in both German and English. It's very interactive, requires no legal prior knowledge. We try to make it as entertaining as possible. If that's of interest to you, feel free to check out our website, and there you can also make an appointment with me directly. At the end of the webinar, we'll also be sharing my email address. You're also welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm very happy to continue the conversation about this then. But with that, I hand it over to Jona, who will talk about the technical aspects of AI literacy as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula. Very good. So let's start from the beginning. We heard already, or Paula mentioned that one interesting technical consideration would be an AI inventory. But let's first start with a very basic of AI literacy, namely, what is an AI system anyway? And I presented to you 2 definitions here. The first one is from the EU AI Act itself, so a very legal definition. It reads, AI system means a machine-based system that is designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy and that may exhibit adaptiveness after deployment, fancy term, and that for explicit or implicit objectives infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs, such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. Very lawy and legal, and yeah, something that is still important to know because it is the definition of the Act. I find the Wikipedia definition still very helpful. It is, last time I checked, it remains the same for quite a long time now. That means something. And it reads, artificial intelligence, AI, refers to the capability of computational systems to perform tasks typically associated with human intelligence. And that, in a sense, of course, is not a very good definition because it leaves open the question, what is human intelligence anyway? But on the other hand, it gives a very good intuitive sense of an AI system. So whatever a human can perform, there's a lot of course, if an AI system does such a thing, then, or a computer system for that matter, then it can be named an AI system. And that really is a very broad category, right? It can be a rule-based system for spam filters in your email inbox, so very based on keywords, for example, and it can be very sophisticated systems that learn from data. We at Gradient Zero and Daiki, we are basically mainly concerned with machine learning, so data-driven systems. And of course, there's one very important category that is nowadays almost synonymous to AI these days, which are large language models. This slide here is very, very text heavy. And of course, that's not good, but it's bad practice for a presentation, but there's a reason for it, because this text here comes in the spirit of AI literacy from a very good video on YouTube from Andrej Karpathy. I bet many of you know him already. Really highly recommended. I mean, there's a ton of good videos out there, but this is really one of the highlights. It's a bit longer than the usual TikTok clip. I think it's about 3 hours, but it's really worth the time. This text here is basically a summary of the transcript of this video by ChatGPT. So please bear with me. I will quickly read it because it gives you a first, at least intuitive sense of what LLMs are actually composed of and what they can be used for. So LLMs are giant neural networks trained on enormous amounts of text, often the entire internet. During pre-training, they learn to predict the next piece of text, that's a token, in sequences drawn from real documents. This compresses a vast amount of linguistic and word knowledge into the model's parameters. Later, in post-training, they learn to behave more like helpful assistants by being fine-tuned with human-made conversations, examples, or through reinforcement learning. That's basically the tweak that ChatGPT introduced back in the days, and which made this interface concept of large language models so powerful. Under the hood, when you chat with an LLM, both your message and its replies get chopped into tokens, these tiny bits of text. The model that generates the next token, and thus the next words, based on statistical patterns it has learned. Because it's simply predicting tokens, it can't browse the web on its own or do precise math unless it's connected to external tools. When given specialized training, often called thinking or chain of thought training, the model can reason through harder tasks like coding or math more accurately, though it may take longer to respond. Essentially, LLMs are extremely advanced text predictors that have absorbed enormous amounts of word knowledge through their training. What I like about this definition is that, on the one hand, it's very technical and very normal, very basic, and really it just says it's a statistical machine based on huge amounts of text data. On the other hand, it basically means that you have a tool at your fingertips here, which is capable of basically chatting with you about every topic that is available on the internet. And that's really my recommendation for the use cases of these LLMs. Use it as your sparring partner for whatever your topic you want, in business cases or also in private, because it just has such a broad knowledge about so many topics and is able to articulate and communicate and hold conversations about these topics in such an elegant way. And again, please watch the video. It's really worth your time and a very good step in your AI literacy journey along the ADA courses, of course. So then let's get a bit more practical. Let's consider this LLM that ChatGPT or Anthropic Claude or Mistral, if you want to use an European system, is on your list, and you want to, first you basically on your literacy journey, you understood what these systems are capable of. You want to use this system as a provider. So for example, you're building a chatbot application for your customer management in your software. So one of the second steps then, of course, is to implement or to gain understanding about the EUAR Act implications of using or deploying such a system. So as a provider, as Paula explained, you are the one that actually builds the system or builds on top of such a system. You're responsible to do an initial risk assessment according to the AI Act. And this slide here presents a very, very rough sketch of such a decision tree. It's incomplete. It's even wrong, arguably. It's very a oversimplified version. So please read the legal text or use our Daiki system that I show you in a minute. But just to give you a sense of it, right? So if you start the assessment, you could first check the articles that state a list of systems that are exempt from the Act. So military systems, for example, interestingly. In that case, the AI Act does not apply to your system. If that's not the case, then you could check if the system violates fundamental rights or pose unacceptable risks, just generally speaking. In that case, the system poses an unacceptable risk and is prohibited according to the Act. And that really means that such a system can never be published in the EU. For example, face recognition or emotion control systems, stuff like this. And then we have the high risk category, where you have a list, or actually a couple of lists, which explicitly define certain categories or classes of AI systems that basically automatically sort these systems into the high risk category. And you also have a couple of assessments, questions. For example, if the system influences people, impacts safety, or is part of a safety component, or if it collects sensitive data, in which case the system is also considered a high risk AI system. And then finally, you have the two, so to speak, lower risk categories, minimal and limited risk, which has also some very specific distinctions, but one important one easier to remember one at least is that if you use personal consumer data, then it's definitely limited risk. Otherwise, it could be even minimal risk. So let's have a look at Daiki. So this here is really just a screenshot of the Daiki system. And I will now show you how the Daiki inventory, we call it the Daiki AI registry, is basically assessing your AI system based on the metadata you provide about the system. So if we can switch the screen, yes. There we are, okay. So that's the AI dashboard. If I go to my system cards here, and let me just add a card here, then what you see here is basically a description, the metadata or high-level description of your AI system. And what you can do here, you can click on Start Assessment, and now you can chat with the Daiki assistant, and the Daiki assistant will basically spill out your risk category according to the AI Act. So let me put in something like maybe for the medical context, so that's most likely high risk AI system to detect atrial fibrillation. Spell it correctly would help. So what is happening in the back here, that's obviously an LLM-based interface, as you can see, but it's heavily rule-based. So it's not just a ChatGPT system or something, it's really a rule-based system where we implemented all these decision tree elements. And Daiki will now basically answer a couple of questions to find out if you have an high-risk system or low or limited risk system. So for example, this question here lists a couple of categories that fall into this high risk class. It also asks for a third-party conformity assessment. So let's just write yes, that needs a third-party assessment and see what happens. Of course, you can answer with any question or any other way you like. It's a chat-based system. So you can also ask for explanations, examples, and so but let's keep it short and answer this question directly. So a medical device, in that case, to give you the context, needs a third-party conformity assessment because of the medical device regulation in the EU. And as you can see, there's already enough information because this third-party conformity assessment requires or basically determines the risk level, which is high risk. And Daiki will give you the result here, the reason, and also the obligations that you have as a provider of such a system. So you have the high risk system obligations here, and you also have AI literacy obligations that we already see. Let's just, for the sake of the demo, give us a few more minutes, start with another example. Chatbot for customer feedback management, just as one silly example here. Just to show you that also a system that is not made, maybe not for meant for medical devices, and third-party conformity assessments can be tracked according to these AI assessment system. So it does not require a third-party assessment. And now, most probably, the system will follow up with a couple of questions that relate to the other aspects of, for example, high-risk categories. That's another list of high-risk categories: biometrics, for example, critical infrastructure, educational vocational training, employment, human resources. That's an interesting one because we do have customers in that space. So if you want to build systems for HR, then most probably, depending on the use case, your system is considered high risk. But in that case, it's really just customer management. So just say, let's say no. It's not in HR. It's also not in law enforcement or migration. Is it interacting with people? Yes, it is. And finally, does it generate synthetic content? It's also very interesting because synthetic content in this case comprises text, audio, images, and video. Yeah, so also text is synthetic content. So every time you use a chatbot and it spills out text, that's already synthetic content according to this classification. And finally, let's select that we are a provider. As explained, deployer would be the other option when you just use it without rebranding or any changes. But we act as a developer here. So we are a provider. And that should have been the final question. Let's see.
It's thinking. It's a good thing.
It's thinking, and it's minimal risk. That's expected. So because it's really just a customer-facing chatbot. So what you have still is some obligations based on the interaction, for example. Since the system is interacting with people, you have certain obligations. You have certain obligations for synthetic content, both basically related to transparency. So it means that you need to be explicit about the usage of AI. Your users of your system needs to be aware that they are interacting with an AI system, and also the content that is generated by the AI needs to be marked in a machine-readable format and detectable. And that can be tricky. In the case of text, it's very tricky. In the case of images and other artifacts, there might be interesting solutions that are also implemented in Daiki. And finally, again, you have the AI literacy obligations also in that case. So let's jump back to the slides. Right, let's take the next one. So that's really just a quick summary of the high-risk obligations. So for example, you need to establish and implement a risk management system. So these are really just directly from the legal text of the AI Act, your obligations that you would need to fulfill in case you want to put a high-risk AI system to market in the EU. As Paula mentioned, the literacy obligation is already effective, and the high-risk AI system obligations will follow. And of course, it's a good idea to at least be aware which are present and how we can prepare to be compliant in that case. So you need the risk management process, you need a quality management system, you need to validate your data, you need documentation and logging, you need transparency, you need to think about human oversight, and you need to ensure robustness, accuracy, and cybersecurity of your systems. With all of these obligations, the Daiki management system can help because it provides templates and procedures that you can use to basically fulfill these obligations. And then, as mentioned, please go on. Yeah. Thanks. As mentioned, let's provide a more practical example. So what does it mean now? I wanted, like I said at the beginning, you want to use ChatGPT in your organization and product. And that's really a question that I hear a lot. That's really a real-world question, so to speak. Am I allowed to use ChatGPT at work or in my products? So as a productivity tool for me personally at work, or even in a product or a project that I'm developing for my company. And of course, the answer from legal is always, it depends. But I mean, that's always the legal answer because it's the correct answer, right? It's a very, very unhelpful answer, but of course the correct answer because it does depend. One answer that I also heard just the other week is, we're currently working on a company-wide policy, right? And that's even worse because that means, okay, let's come back in 2 years or what. So what you can do in practice, it's really not about so much which AI system you're using, but how you're using it. So it's not so much the question, am I allowed to use ChatGPT or Claude or Mistral or any other system? It's more about how can you make sure that you actually are on top of your system. You are literate, AI literate enough to fulfill the compliance aspects and use the system in a compliant way. And in that sense, AI literacy means that you need to know which systems you can use for which use case, how to do the risk assessments and impact assessments, like I showed you, what happens to the data that is processed by the AI system, how to control and check what the AI system is doing, so basically monitoring aspects of it all, and in a nutshell, or generally, how you can implement AI governance structures to equip your team and the organization with the necessary tools and procedures to maintain and control these AI systems.
If I can briefly add one comment there. Of course, the AI Act is not the only law governing AI systems. So particularly when you go through these kinds of questions that Jona helpfully outlined already, you also obviously want to take into consideration what kind of data is being input in the system. Does this fall under data protection obligations? Because the sort of more dominant law also regulating AI systems may actually also still be the EU General Data Protection Regulation. And when you also think about deploying AI solutions, you have to comply with those GDPR requirements as well, including potentially EU-US data transfers, which might become a little trickier going forward again. So just sort of like putting that on your radar as well. It's not just the AI Act, it's also data protections, information security obligations, trade secrets, right? The minute that your employee publishes company secrets on the web, they are not covered by trade secrets anymore. So yeah, obviously you want to have that conversation with employees. And no, AI is also not the solution. So if you're thinking like, well, I don't want to have to deal with the compliance here, I'm just not going to allow AI systems at all. Just bear in mind that what's likely going to happen is that your employees will just use AI systems on their private laptops, right? It's just too compelling to make life easier. You don't want to like create these hindrances for employees artificially. They know how to help themselves. And if you don't have clear enforceable rules that prevent that, you might still be liable for what employees do with work information on their private laptops as well. So better to just have clear communication channels and invest in AI literacy and other data protection, information security awareness measures from the beginning to make sure you facilitate the use of AI in a responsible manner.
Yes, very good point. Thanks. There are even studies or numbers that you can find where the numbers clearly show that the usage of such systems, even during work hours, are much higher than the business adoption, which cannot be true, obviously. So yeah, that's a very good idea to become AI literate and implement good AI policies in your organization. So let's look at this next slide to let's to further evaluate what this means in practice, because that's really a kind of a silly solution, but a real one that I hear a lot. What can you do to use ChatGPT in your organization? Just use Copilot. That's a really common solution. And the funny thing about this is that Microsoft equips you with everything you need from a legal side. They have a very good network, as you know, of business people and legal stuff and support stuff, and are compliant with all the GDPR and other regulations. So if you use Copilot in your organization, you are most definitely on the safe side. It's just maybe not the best idea to do everything with Microsoft. It's a very, very strong vendor lock-in, and there are other options, there are better options. And as Paula mentioned, your employees will always take the best option, which is not always Copilot. So what they can do
again, there might be because you mentioned sovereignty on the slide as well, the EU-US data transfer issue. Microsoft has obviously invested a lot with regards to local hosting, but that might not necessarily completely remove it from the grip of the US administration. So I think going forward, we're going to see European companies necessarily looking for like European solutions a lot more to make sure to sort of cover the data protection and information security side as well.
Yeah, exactly. Good. So what is your other option? The other option is to become AI literate and to learn about the AI system use cases. You can ask Claude or any other AI system for this. It's a very good source, actually. And you can basically implement the AI literacy program and an AI policy program in your organization to be on top and to make informed decisions about your AI systems. So you can select or develop AI system. Now you know what AI systems are, you know where to find information, you know how to assess them. So you can basically implement this risk assessment processes. In the beginning, they can be quite lean with such a system like Daiki that I showed you, just a few questions and answers, and AI inventory, which gives you a clear overview. These are my AI systems, that's my portfolio of AI systems with different risk levels and different impacts and different obligations. And you can basically guarantee in that way that you documented and implemented the necessary steps to be compliant and to be also on the safe side regarding business opportunities and sustainable success. Because in the end, if you have an informed decision and a clear AI roadmap, AI adoption will also be successful in your organization. So that's basically just the basic steps. What you can do additionally is you can create an AI strategy, an AI policy, which is always a good idea if you want to start with AI adoption. What this means is basically to write down how your organization can benefit in the mid to long term from AI. I think it's such a powerful technology that it's always almost a no-brainer to actually take this very seriously and implement such an AI policy. What this entails is also to define responsibilities. So many organizations implement AI officers, which often comes from the business intelligence teams, could also be external, could also be external solutions, software solutions. But what is really important is to make somebody responsible for driving these initiatives and to formulate this AI strategy and policy, and especially align this with top management, so that you also have a top-down AI strategy in place. You also, in a second step, can implement a basic AI governance framework. So you can engage with AI literacy experts like Ada, as shown, to plan trainings or to become more AI literate, and also transfer the learned sessions or learned content to an AI governance system, where you basically, in such an AI inventory system, as explained, can write down what you are planning to do with your AI systems, and keep track of the usages and the deployments of these systems. Finally, measure success. It's also very important. It is a good first step to implement AI governance processes, but it's always good to work with KPIs or really measurable steps, so you can make sure that the most important aspect of all, namely the business value, can be actually achieved and measured and aligned with all your units, especially also HR, of course, to actually make use of AI in a successful manner. One last aspect is integration. So if you integrate well with project management tools, and governance tools, for example, Daiki gives you a lot of opportunities for integrations with your project management and portfolio management tools, for example, then the implementation of such an AI governance solution is really not an overhead, but provides you with this added benefit of an AI strategy and a clear AI inventory with risk assessments and compliance baked in. Yes, and that's it already. So please feel free to shoot questions in the comment sections.
Otherwise, of course, it's like at the end of a good meal, best silence is just a compliment to the host. That's how we will interpret that. You're all just digesting all this helpful information. Maybe we can go to the next slide already, though, because our contact information is displayed there as well, as people are still sort of like pondering questions. So if you don't feel comfortable asking your question in the webinar directly, you're also welcome to sort of like contact us under those email addresses as well. One thing, for instance, like we'd be curious to know, actually, if somebody's willing to share, is if there are any particular aspects of AI Act compliance that you'd be interested also in learning about in future webinars, because we are planning this as a series. So if you have any preferences, please feel to express them in the comments as well. And we understand, of course, like some of these topics might only come up over time. I remember working together with various companies leading up to GDPR compliance, and typically there was a big scramble 6 months before the law came into effect, but the AI Act is a bit different in the sense that like requirements come into effect in a kind of staged manner. So there's at least no clear moment in time when everybody will start panicking, but I remember a lot of this will still require figuring out. In any case, the nice thing about AI compliance requirements as well, I know that there have been a lot of complaints about the AI Act as well, but really a lot of what the AI Act requires first only applies to high-risk AI systems, and then second of all is really also engineering best practices. So that's also why platforms like the ones that Daiki offers really help get your AI systems in order and ultimately run your business more effectively as well. So I think there's a nice synergy there between compliance requirements and what you need to drive your business forward. If somebody wants a hopeful message about compliance before heading out.
Exactly. And also drive success. That's also our mission. Like trustworthy AI is also good AI, is successful AI.
Yeah.
That's
and I actually also strongly believe that in the medium term, maybe there's a bit of an uphill battle now for European companies to comply in the beginning, but those investments will pay off in the long run. Because ultimately, AI made in Europe will be the most reliable and trustworthy one. So if you want a high quality system, then that's where you want to invest. All right, but if there are no further questions, obviously again, oh, no, there's one coming in. Yeah. With regards to the notified bodies in DACH to check on compliance under the EU AI Act. So I think that it's sort of various aspects to the enforcement. Like one of them is at the supervisory level. So here it increasingly looks like the Bundesnetzagentur will be the supervisory body for AI Act enforcement, but in collaboration with the data protection authorities. This is partly because product regulation is typically handled at the state level. So there needs to be some sort of collaboration between the federal level and the state level. But then at the same time, there's also a variety of standardization processes going on in the background. So like standards that are essentially meant to help companies self-certify compliance and or go to an organization that can sort of like confirm compliance. And here I think you'll see typical providers like TÜV offering certification programs as well. But obviously platforms like Daiki can help you sort of like get the process in order for these kinds of like certification programs. I don't know, Jona, if you want to add anything to that.
No, that's good.
We received a question about the slides as well. I imagine it's not a problem to share those. I think you can either probably just get in touch with us after the webinar, and then we can send those out. I think that's probably the easiest way to do that.
Yeah.
And then we also have a question about what complex ethical, social, and legal questions arise from the use of AI-based systems in shaping human AI interaction. Definitely a lot of complex questions there, which is also why, for instance, in Article 50 of the AI Act, there's a specific set of requirements attaching to AI systems interacting with humans. So these might be AI systems generating synthetic content that could be classified as deepfakes, right? So like when you kind of influence people's perceptions of reality. But it could also just be so like customer-facing AI systems. I think it's a really good framing of the question because it's not just a legal question, but also an ethical one, right? What we see in certain countries increasingly, for instance, is the use of care robots in elderly care. So oftentimes the elderly, if they are in nursing homes, can get quite lonely. So some countries are experimenting with sort of like implementing robots in those environments that are oftentimes shaped like pets. And then, you know, elderly people feel less lonely, but they also develop a bond with these robots. And that obviously not only, you know, they're not only legal questions attached to that, but also ethical questions. For instance, would you be able to shut off like a care robot, right? What would the licensing for that look like? Yes, whenever like thinking through AI literacy programs as well, I think it's important to cover the legal basics, but also provide concrete real-life examples of the ethical challenges that might go along with that. Because implementing AI responsibly is not just about covering the legal basis, but also creating an awareness within a company with regards to the impact that the AI system you will be building will have on society. And the more tangible you can make that with examples, the better.
Yeah. And maybe also just to add this on a technical level, this transparency aspect is really not that easy in human AI interactions,
Yeah.
especially for synthetic content, images, videos, and so on, deepfakes. That's really a big challenge. I mean, interacting with an AI system and be aware that you interact with an AI system, that's kind of easy if you're at least interacting with a responsible AI vendor provider. But regarding the content, that's a whole different story and will be quite a challenge. There are technical solutions, fingerprinting and so on, watermarking, but that's remains to be seen how adoption goes and how also the tech can keep up with the requirements here.
And you also probably don't want notification fatigue as you have, for instance, with cookie requirements, where you constantly have the banners and pop-ups. So I think there'll be a lot of innovation happening at the level of like human-computer interfaces as well, like how AI systems will make themselves appear, and particularly as we move into a world where we'll have a lot more voice-based interaction with AI systems, where AI might be sort of like running in the background. You can constantly say like, "Hey Siri" or "Hey Meta." I think like Meta is also sort of like exploring different solutions in that, and other tech companies as well. So watch that space.
Yeah, interesting. Next question about the Copilot. That's indeed. Thanks for this question, because I think my example was a bit too light, probably. So what I meant here, so yes, I totally agree. The Copilot-based system is basically exactly the same regarding the AI assessment and high-risk applications as a ChatGPT-based system. I mean, for that matter, Copilot is based on ChatGPT, I mean, Microsoft tries to move away a bit from OpenAI recently, but still Copilot is like equals ChatGPT, just to be very clear here. My example was just that from a AI policy point of view, Microsoft has already all the tools and procedures that helps you get started with such a system like Copilot. It's the same story with GDPR. They will just tell you that they have this secure data centers, as Paula mentioned, which is, well, partly true. But so that was really just the distinction here. Yes, the AI assessment and the high risk obligations are completely the same.
But of course, I think also something that you were implying, Jona, is that Microsoft obviously has a lot of resources as well, right, to provide you with a whole sort of like compliance-facing package in terms of like liabilities as well and the kinds of guarantees it can provide. But again, there's a risk of vendor lock-in as well. There's a certain risks that unfortunately are becoming more apparent again as well with regards to working with US vendors. So I think that's just something to be aware of. And of course, ideally, we at some point will have a more thriving European ecosystem as well. So it's always good to sort of like put your bets onto several horses. I think that's actually part of a risk strategy as well to diversify your AI investments.
Yes, basically. And please do evaluate Mistral, for example, so just to put out one EU-based company here. It's also very good option.
All right. Well, we are approaching time, so I would say we'll wrap it up at this point. Thanks again, everyone who joined us today. Again, feel free to reach out to us individually as well, either via email or on LinkedIn. And we look forward to keeping in touch. Feel free to also send suggestions for future webinars if you have any. And yeah, we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.